Okay, we're going to get started. So thanks for coming and joining us again today. I'm Kim Schroeder, the career advisor for SIS. I realized I didn't introduce myself. What? Okay. I know, but I had said I wanted to do it a little earlier because we got out of the other one earlier, but I wasn't sure if it was set up. So I have to wait. Okay. All right, I understood. So we're going to get started in just 30 seconds. She said 24. Thank you for counting that. I appreciate it. Oh, yeah. Oh, for anything, for sure. May I begin? All right, well, I don't want to hold it up too much because we have speakers at 1:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I'm career advisor and I do workshops a couple times a year. So we did one for prepping for the career fair for the first time this year, and that was really fun. I think that was helpful. But I wanted to just talk to you because I also have aside from the library science background and the archive background, I have a marketing degree. And so there aren't enough of us with a business background in the field to just kind of come in trained on budgets and marketing and publicity and how to market yourself even to get a job. So I want to make sure I'm sharing some of that with everybody that's out there looking for a job. So let's talk about that a little bit. So there's definitely things that you can do to get ready. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from employers, and they talk to me a lot because they'll often ask me to recommend someone, is that they'll interview someone and you folks really haven't thought about commonly asked questions, don't have an answer for why do you want to work here, so those kind of typical things. So it's a process you want to go through, so you can't go unprepared. So I would make sure you spend some time on the career advising link. So it's on our SIS webpage. If you email me, it's also in my signature line, so that way I'm kind of promoting that. But we've got commonly asked questions on there. We've got helpful tips for phone interviews. We've got some resume examples. We've got lists of sites you might want to check out for job hunting. So there's a lot of material there. And I'll be every summer, usually I kind of revamp that a little bit. So I'll be working on that over the summer. So you definitely, of course, are going to check job postings, but you also need to do a self-assessment about what you offer, okay? And I think that our field attracts a lot of really nice people, which is a great thing, right? Except a lot of you really struggle with how much is expressing what kind of employee you would be and how much is bragging. And so a lot of people are really uncomfortable with just plainly stating what they offer as bragging. And so what I tell you is an employer is not psychic. So they don't know you well enough to know what kind of employee and what you would offer. So you have to spell it all out, okay? And they need that. And think about it, if they're looking at 100 resumes, they're not going to look back on one conversation they had with you one time and say, oh yeah, I remember she did that. You've got to spell everything out in that resume and that material. Participating is really important. I must have a discussion about this every day of my life. So participating in professional associations, participating in student associations, going to conferences, writing a poster and having that up at a professional organization. These are all things that both increase your visibility and show you're a participatory, committed member of our field. That's the way you meet people. I don't want you for a second to think that you have to go be the biggest extrovert and meet every single person at a conference. That's not what we're saying. Just do things to stay in touch with the field, do things to increase your skill set, do things to meet some people. If you go to a conference and meet 1 or 2 people, that's still a win. So, don't put too much pressure on yourself, but definitely I see professionally written papers come across my screen every semester, and I say to that student, you should really publish this. And it almost never happens. So there are things you guys are creating as graduate students that are of value, that I'm saying are of value, that you probably, if you really looked at it, realize it's of value, and you could be sharing and reincorporating into a presentation or a blog post or a poster session. So really, I think we need to do a better job of making sure you guys feel really confident that you're sharing intelligent information. You've done the research. You're a good writer. You have an important take on that topic. So I really want to make sure that you guys feel empowered too. So you really want to analyze the job postings, and it's kind of like indexing and abstracting. So if you're looking at a book to index an abstract, you are pulling out the most important parts of it to describe and to include, and it's the same thing for a job posting. So you're looking at a job posting, there might be 20, 22 skills listed in some of these, right? You can't speak to all of that. For one thing, it's highly unlikely you would exactly match all of those things. For another thing, your cover letter would be a novel, right? And so would your resume. And so you've got to be able to understand and assess what are the most important things they're looking for that you also can sell that you have, right? So they might have 5 things that you keep seeing repeat, and you think, okay, these are the 5 skills out of the 22 that are most important, and 3 of those I can really support that I have that. Okay, so that's how you want to approach that. I also talk to students all the time that say, gee, I don't have that one skill, and I think it's really important. And you know what I say? Look at YouTube, look at Wikipedia, look at some of the free sources for training we have. There's some online courses that are free. There's web conferences. There's all these kinds of things out there where you may be able to get something going or do a little project to get more familiar with that technology or that process, whatever it is. So definitely you can show initiative that way. When I have highly technical people working in our field in jobs like a web development job or a web librarian, when they come to talk to my classes, they often say, I didn't learn everything magically in library school. I showed initiative. So I went and bought, Python for Dummies, and I logged myself away for a weekend, or CSS, or, Drupal, or whatever it is. So there's some initiative you can show too to learn everything you need. So here's a job posting from some job postings from Indeed.com, which is one of the ones probably I use most for trying to keep an eye out for what skills employers are looking for. And if you look at some of these, they've really defined things into what's preferred, what's required, and so you've got to kind of balance that. And this is a little easier because it's already kind of broken down than a normal job posting. And I'm going to hurry through this a little bit because I feel like I'm running out of time already. So that's a long job posting, and there's a lot of things that you can break down. When you do your self-assessment, okay, you need to look at what your interests are. There's lots of personality tests you can take out there to see how you work in the workplace and what speaks to you. Any internships or volunteer projects or anything that you do, not only build your resume, but help you to decide what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And maybe what you don't want to do might be most important, because you don't want to move across country and then discover, I hate cataloging 24 hours a day or 40 hours a week. It's too much. Okay, so you want to make sure you understand that, maybe you want to do something different, or maybe you want to do cataloging 20 hours a week, but you want to work the desk another 20. So it helps you to understand. The other thing is breaking down all your skills, and that might include volunteer management, that might include community work that you do, but all of those things make sense for this job market. And what your values are. So you heard from Crystal Jolly earlier. She's got really strong work values about making an impact on Detroit youth. That comes through loud and clear. That's her career value. Her career value is that she wants to help her city at the same time she's garnering and growing in her career. So you've got to think about what you want to obtain. So one of the things that I had a student tell me at one of our workshops, so I thought was a great idea, is she and another student were getting together every Sunday morning for coffee, and they would take one of the questions from our career advising page that has commonly asked questions, and they would work on the answer that they each would have for the week, and then they would get together and answer it in front of each other, and then they would kind of grade each other and say, oh, well, that's good, but that might spin negatively because of this, or you forgot that you also do this, you could add that in. So they were just kind of job hunting buddies, and it was, I thought, a really nice way to get more comfortable with the questions in interviewing. And that, along the same lines, you could do with resumes and cover letters. Now, I look at them, but it's also good to have someone close to you look at them who say, you're really underselling that you did all this community work and that's not on there. Or, someone that knows you best that will say, wait. And so a lot of times I feel like I'm a journalist when I'm working with students and alumni, because I'm asking them all these questions. Well, what exactly did you do in your undergrad? Well, did you do any community work? Do you have any links to projects or papers that are, would fit into this job? And so you want to make sure you're including that in here. So there's a lot of those things where you're really trying to think about all that you are right now and how those skills you've developed, whether in school or out of school, will formulate you to be an employee. So participation, we say it in orientation. I say it all the time in career advising. Just be present, right? Was it Einstein that said, 90% of success is showing up? You really just need to show up for things, attend meetings, and go to things. I will tell you unequivocally that the students or alumni that contact me a year after they've graduated that don't have jobs generally slammed through school and didn't get active. So get involved in our profession in some way. The employers, if you look at surveys, not just in our field, but in any field, want to know you can apply what you're learning in school. And so when you're dealing with public service, they want to know you can handle yourself. They want to know that you're not going to be rude to a client, a customer, a patron. They want to know that you can handle the archival material carefully. And so you've got to prove yourself. And it's an example of my friend who manages internships at Library of Congress said to me, he said, we don't send nurses out into work with patients without having done nursing assistant work, right? You work in the hospital as well as in the classroom. And it's very similar, and it's the same thing I think that should happen, with UX. You want to make sure that you're showing that you can actually do this work and not just learn in theory, and any type of information management, because what we're trying to create uniformly is access to information. So we might organize it, we might preserve it, but for sure what we're all doing is creating access. Definitely make sure you're connecting with your instructors when you're getting ready to graduate and let them know that you're looking for work. That's really important. Make sure that you are doing anything you can think of that's hands-on. It doesn't have to be unpaid. If you can find a paid internship, great. We have our digital media projects lab if you're local. So I have projects in there. I know we're going through a bit of a change in the lab because we had some building issues, but we're getting new computers, and so the lab's going to be going gangbusters over the summer. So if you're interested in projects, let me know. Visibility, we've got our SIS blog, and we get a lot of information on there. If you're job hunting, you might want to just look through what the alt spring break and practicum students are saying about their experiences at different institutions. It'll give you some insight as to what you may or may not want to do. Strongly encourage you to publish your coursework or work with another student or a faculty member to do so. So we're here to support you. Every single faculty member would be happy to talk to you about recrafting something that you've worked on. When people contact me to look at their resume, the first thing I ask them is, what's your ideal job? So that I have a sense of where they want to go, okay? And that's especially true when I have an alum contact me, is I kind of want to know, okay, we've been out for a little while, what do you want to do? And I ask that because life is really short and you spend a lot of time at work. I don't want you to just get any job. You're probably not even going to be happy in it. I want you to get something that's really going to make you happy. And so let's craft your resume and your skills for what you want to really be doing with your life. And so you really want to, any of these things up here will help you immensely in getting in the job market. And so you really got to look at that. I will say that Metro Detroit is tighter on the job market than other areas, and that's because we have the two schools so close together. So I also often ask people, are you tied to this area, or are you open to moving beyond? Because that obviously affects some of us as well. I got a resume the other day with their high school and their graduation date on there. I said, you do not need that on there, right? So you really want to focus on your resume on what applies to that job. So I often encourage people to do a section called relevant professional work, and you can pick and choose out of your life what makes most sense to include for that job. And that way you're indicating to them you're not including, everything that where you worked at Burger King, so you're moving on. Now, if you worked at Burger King and you were a manager in customer service, that might be something different that you would want to include. But I'm talking about, average entry level sort of high school Burger King, we don't need to include. But you could mention that you have a year of customer service in your cover letter, because that is applicable. So it's really looking at focusing your skill sets on how they relate to this field or the job. And so if you look, I've got some workshops online and some PowerPoints that talk about that, or I'll be doing some more workshops. But you think about how you could phrase something, and then I work with you to make sure you're emphasizing what you really got out of that job. So I was working with somebody that was working retail, and she was just putting that, she was a customer service person at Macy's. And I said, well, did you organize anything? Did you deal with any information? Did you get any awards while you were there? Well, then it turns out she was getting increasing responsibilities. That's important to put down. That she was Employee of the Month several times. Well, that's important to put down. So even if it isn't a direct information professional job, she's got skills with people that are important. It's very important. So you got to think about including all of that. So obviously you've got the tools. So what do you want to communicate about who you are? And I'm going to start going really fast now so I don't hold up Stephen and Kathy, but make sure your master's degree is at one line on your resume. Make sure that you're including a composite of really who you are. They want to know that you're stable, that you're a team player, that you show initiative. I mean, that's pretty uniform for almost every job. So think of ways you can express and convince them that that's who you are. So you need to, even before you go into a job interview, think about anecdotes where you solved a problem at a previous job, where you innovated something, where you dealt with a problem customer, where you solved a technology problem, where you trained for technology, something where they say, oh, that skill is portable to this job, and that's great. And a lot of us tend to say, somebody says, oh, thank you for doing that. And you go, oh, it's nothing. Well, it is something, and it might be more than other people might do. So make sure you're expressing that. Here's an example of reading a job posting like I was mentioning. So here's my translation. So on the left is kind of what it says, and on the right is what they really want. So they really want a can-do person who's pretty flexible, right? Because it's kind of a lot of things they're looking for. Okay, so being able to really read and digest and analyze the job postings will help you to write the cover letter in the tone that they're looking for an employee. Keywords or phrases: dependable, works well with others, respectful, flexible. Technology skills: decisive, independent, and I would venture to say hip, right? Because we're fighting lots of stereotypes in this field, and it's important for you to be on top of technology, to be understanding what consumers are looking for and how that's portable to your environment. So whether you're designing websites or whether you're dealing in a traditional library or archive setting. So cover letters, definitely there's a lot of things in here, and we can post this, but you want to make sure you have a technology skills section in your resume or cover letter somewhere, because that is just so highly valuable. And, you know, America values that so much. Resumes, you don't have to include years for everything you did everything anymore. So if they give you a job application, then you may have to, but for your resume, you don't have to say what year you graduated high school or college, how long you were somewhere. You could put the number of years you were at a place. But people are pretty understanding now that people take time off for health reasons, for caregiving, for child rearing, so that's understandable. Oh, here's an example. I did include it, sorry. So, you know, sales associate, sorting clothing, putting up sales items, etc. You know, this is the lower is my change. So you don't want to lie or misrepresent, but generally what I see with our students by far, I don't think I've ever seen anybody over-represent themselves, is we underrepresent. So we really undersell ourselves. So I wanted to give you an example. References, definitely. I encourage people to include those in their application materials, even if they haven't asked, so don't tell anyone. But the reason I do that is it's purely psychological, that if you have really good references, then I would include them even without them asking, because they can't unsee it. So, and we're such a small community that they'll say, oh, well, Dr. Holly recommends her. You know, I know Bob, and he wouldn't do that unless he really thought highly of her. So I'm really gonna take her more seriously. That all might be going through the back of their mind, and they may not verbalize it, but it helps. So I strongly encourage you, if you've got, you know, really solid references, to include them. So be sure to prepare stories, as I mentioned, and here's some examples of things you could think about to include. Follow-up is hard. It's one of the hardest questions it is for me to answer and for you. A lot of people have been taught to follow up with a thank you card after an interview. I totally agree, but you're getting people now saying we don't want any follow-up. And then you're paralyzed because you feel like good manners would be, you know, to send a follow-up. So if you have someone and you can send a handwritten card, I totally would do that. But these days you don't always have that, especially if it was a phone interview. You might have one email address, but not everybody's. But you could at least send an email that way. I still think that a thank you is important. Big mistake is most common is underselling yourself, and secondly, I see lots of resumes from the previous career that you had. So I see lots of great teaching resumes, but if I'm looking for an information professional, I would not hire you because you have not convinced me you're an information professional. You have convinced me you're a teacher with an MLIS. Okay, so you've got to rewrite your resume and your previous jobs to think about it. And there'll be hints. So if the MLIS or the MSIM is your thing, there'll be hints in your previous jobs that this is where you're heading. So were you the one that was always solving the technology problems in your previous office, and then you decided to get an MSIM? Were you the one that wanted to try to do a database for your office? Were you the one that was always organizing things and knew where everything was? So there'll be indications in previous career of where you were headed, and you can make sure you're pulling those things out in your resume. So I did this little form that we might want to do. So basically, you have to develop your brand, right? So you have to have the Paula brand or the Bob brand, and you need to figure out who that is, okay? And only when you do that self-assessment can you convincingly sell yourself to an employer. You have to know what you're offering. So you have a master's degree, that's great, but what do you offer from that? So just because you did the coursework, you need to be able to sell yourself as a brand. What do you offer? You know, I show great initiative because I started, you know, a teen advisory group, or I started, you know, a gaming group. I worked with my community on environmental activism and arranged all the volunteers and, you know, protests, whatever it is. But you need to make sure you're expressing what your brand is and what differentiates you. So you could include accomplishments, you could do unique skills. So these days, you know, not when I graduated, but you could say, I'm really good at Fortnite, and so I would really be able to connect with youth, okay? So, and then remember me, reinforce. What would you want to reinforce at the end of an interview and you leave? What would you want them to remember about you? Or they've read your resume and cover letter. What's the takeaway? Think about it. They have read 100 of these. They have talked to 3 people. What is it when you leave out the door? Do you want the search committee to sit down and say, well, you know, he or she really impressed me because blah, blah, blah. What is that about you that you want to make sure that you're conveying? So here's one I just kind of filled in to be fun. So developing your brand. So this is the Katie brand. So project directed, understanding of technology applications, strong communication skills, was able to successfully work with a long-term problem patron by, you know, whatever you do, excellent writing skills, you know, understanding users' needs, and then supporting that, okay? So developing your brand. Did you have a tough group project, and were you the one that jumped in and tried to work things out? So you can talk about that. So that's a valuable skill. I see lots of eyes rolling on that. So unique skills. Maybe you know Python. Maybe you beta tested a new application. Maybe you have personal involvement in social media tools, whatever it is. So you want to try to express that. You know, maybe you're the social media manager for your organization, and so you want to put that in. And as a remember me, a takeaway, maybe they're going to remember you're a positive problem solver. That sounds pretty good, right? So that's what an employer would need, right? Or understand outreach in both traditional and new ways, strong communication and patron interactions, whatever that you feel like you want that takeaway to be. So feel free to contact me. You know, I'm here to work with students and alum. And I would say we have, 400 students and thousands of alum, and I see about 100 resumes a year. So that's a lot, but it's nowhere near what it probably should be. So feel free to use me. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Feel free to nudge me if you don't hear from me right away, because I have many hats in case you haven't to garner the theme of the day. But I definitely want to try to work with you. Several of you I have worked with. And keep me informed. The best thing in the whole world is when I get a note from a former student that says, I got the job. I mean, that's the best. So, and I wish that for all of you. Any questions? Okay. Yeah. I think so. Well, I think so because that could, fit into a programming. That could make you an expert in programming and, some kind of fitness for your organization. So that could be. But I think that's, sort of in a sense community involvement. That if you're a yoga instructor, you're working with people. So I think that you could frame it that way. And I think that when I see certifications in technology or other things, it just shows that you're a go-getter. And so that all is part of you as a whole, and I think that would be good. Anybody else?